I'm Yukihiro Matsumoto, and you're listening to the Changelog.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Changelog, and I'm your host, Adam Stacoviak. This is episode 202. It's a big show. Yes, years in the making. Jared and I spoke with Matz, the creator of Ruby. We talked all about Ruby. We corrected the title. We were going to call this 20 years of Ruby, and we had it wrong. It's actually 23 years of Ruby. We talked to Matz about its origins, where he came from, naming Ruby, where it's going, where it's been. Everything you think you want to know from Matz about Ruby is in this show. We got 3 awesome sponsors: TopTal, Full Stack Fest, and our friends at Rollbar. Our first sponsor of the show is our friends at TopTal, an exclusive network of top freelance software developers and designers all across the world. Top companies rely upon top freelancers every single day for their most mission-critical projects. And if you're listening to this show and you're a Ruby on Rails developer looking for greater flexibility in the projects you're working on, or you're looking for a community to belong to, or you just like some help thinking through a problem as you work, I highly encourage you to check out TopTal. You'll have a constant stream of top Ruby on Rails jobs to choose from. You have the flexibility to choose the projects you work on, and you'll have the freedom to set your own schedule. You'll get featured on the TopTal engineering blog, which we often link to in Changelog Weekly. You'll get support for speaking at conferences and attending events. Head to toptal.com/railsjobs. That's toptal.com/railsjobs, all one word. But if you'd like a more personal introduction, email me, adam@changelog.com. I'd love to help you take your first step with TopTal. And now, on to the show. All right, we're joined today by Yukihiro Matsumoto, also known as Matz. Now, if you don't know Matz, you must be under a rock. But let me tell you, Matz is a Japanese programmer best known for his work as the chief designer of the Ruby programming language. And he's also known for its reference implementation, Matz Ruby Interpreter, MRI. And Jared, this show for us is literally years in the making, quite literally 20 years. Our roots are in Ruby. Our audience knows our roots are in Ruby. Yep. But to have Matz finally on this show, what do you got? What do you think about that, bro?
Well, I'm pretty excited. Matz, before the show, said he was nervous, and I think we're the ones that should be nervous.
Yeah.
Quite an honor to be joined by you, Matz, and thank you so much for the Ruby programming language, which is something I use daily, and a language design that I compare other languages to see if they measure up. So yes. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for Ruby.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, Matz, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Matz, I guess the best place that would make sense to start for you, and something that, Jared, again, I got my mind blown before the show, and I got to let the listeners know because Matz is a listener of the Changelog. I couldn't believe it. Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
So cool.
Now, Matz, as a listener of the show, you must know that we love to dig into the history, the past of someone. So someone like you who comes on this show, we have to know where you came from. So take us back into your story. Where did things begin for you to become a software developer, become a programmer? Where did things begin for you?
That's a very old story. So when I was in high school, maybe in junior high school, my father bought himself a pocket computer, like the desktop calculator with a keyboard. And that runs BASIC. So I was 15, and then I took his computer and started programming. I was pretty interested in programming. That is my beginning of programming career.
So that was about 1980 for you. Is that right?
Yes, 98.
Give or take. So what was it about this device, this opportunity that made you think, I could do this? I could make something on this. I could make my living doing this. This excites me.
No, I didn't think anything about job or working at that time, the programming is interested me very much, just because I can order computer or I can train computer do things I want to do. I was interested in programming. I can program or train them to work for me.
Right.
Yeah.
You were in control. You could make it do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I can control computers. It's make me feel like I train computers like a dog,
Yeah.
You heard it here first, everybody. Matz trains computers like he can train a dog. That's awesome.
I've tried training a dog and failed miserably. So I think computers might even be easier than dogs.
Yes, my dog does not listen. I tell him to be quiet, and he just keeps asking for the door and wants a bone. He's relentless. Computers, they don't talk back and get angry. I guess they kind of do whenever there's a interpreter issue or something like that.
Yeah, computers are much easier. Mine dogs are bad too.
So, what was your first steps then? Was your first steps tinkering? Was your first steps picking up a book? What was your entrance into feeling like you can actually do it? Not so much getting excited about it, but learning yourself to teach and, as you said, control a computer.
Yeah, the pocket computer was awful just because it was only 400 steps of the capacity, so that we can only type in the maximum 400 lines of code, basic code in that computer. Besides that, they have the variable, no local variables, just global variables, and the length of the variable name is only 1. So we could have only 26 variables. Then I typed in some sample programs out of the reference to the computer, and I modified it like a small game of the hit and blow or some kind of the number calculation, something. The environment was very, very, very limited. So I started feel some kind of the frustration soon after I programmed in that particular computer.
So it was really the frustration, the lack of usability that got you excited, because like anybody, you want things to be easy to use, you want them to be enjoyable, and computers for you was lacking that, and you felt like you can fill that void.
Yeah, but at that time, I didn't know about anything about the other computers, so I just kind of felt frustrated, but I didn't know what is the source of my frustration. So then I came across to the book named Introduction to Pascal Language. So I bought that book, and then I studied about the Pascal programming language. It was some kind of the enlightenment for me, just because this language, Pascal, kind of freed my mind. My cognition of the programming is very limited to the basic before that. But I thought Pascal had everything, like local variables, the recursive calls, and the data user-defined data structures, and everything. Yeah, so that was the first time I started having interested in programming language in general.
What came after Pascal?
So I started read books and magazines about programming and programming language. So then I came across Lisp, Smalltalk, and some other programming languages like Logo. So then these programming languages are pretty amazing for me. But back then, I didn't have the computer that runs that kind of the great programming languages. So I just read the book and studied about them. But I really wanted to programming in them, but I couldn't. That was kind of a frustration.
So you're just reading books about Lisp, books about Smalltalk, but you don't even get to try to use these languages.
No, the computers are very expensive back then.
I always find it interesting, Jared, whenever we have someone on the show that has such a history with, I guess, going through the hard days is all I can think of to describe it, because it's the days whenever, who was our most recent guest? He made the keyboard because that's what he had to do to get to the next step.
Richard Hipp from SQLite.
Yeah, which is a show that isn't quite out yet, but if you're listening to this, then it's out. So go listen to it. Episode 201. But this is a case too where Matz is loving and desiring to program, but can't because access isn't quite there. And so I guess, Matz, what did you do to get access? What's the next step for you there?
Through reading the books about the computer programming languages, so I found out that every programming language was designed by a human being. You know that?
Right.
That means, we don't know who designed English nor Japanese, but we have, for example, John McCluskey for Lisp or, Erlang K for Smalltalk. So the programming language was designed by a specific person or group of people, and they had intention or ideas for their programming languages. So when I was in high school, I was pretty much interested in programming language. And even though I didn't have any chance to programming in those programming languages in reality, but I really interested in programming language, the concept of the programming language. So I just wanted to create my own programming language when I was 17.
It's pretty profound that you have that perspective, because I didn't think, well, I don't know who, and Wikipedia won't tell me who invented the English language. So I never really got curious to the point where I'm like, well, if someone designed it, then I could do it. So I don't know if I've had that perspective that you have. It's interesting that you come to that conclusion on your own.
Yeah. So
you're 17 years old. It's about 1982, if my math is correct.
Yeah,
And
around that time.
At this point, you've used BASIC and you've used Pascal.
I didn't use Pascal.
Oh.
But I knew Pascal.
Oh, okay. So you didn't even use Pascal. You just learned it.
So only BASIC so far.
Only BASIC.
Only BASIC back then.
And you have this kind of a wanderlust or a desire to not just try these languages, but to learn about them, even though you can't use them. And you want to write your own language at age 17.
Yeah.
Did you attempt a language at that time?
It's prior to the internet age. So I didn't know anything. So I didn't have any experience on programming. I didn't have any knowledge for the, compiler writing or anything. So I took my notebook and write down programming in my own programming language.
Awesome.
On papers.
Do you still have that notebook?
That was my question. I was like, do you still have that?
Unfortunately, I lost that notebook.
Oh, man.
You could compare it to Ruby and see how closely you ended up creating.
Yeah.
Something like that 17-year-old wanted.
I vaguely remember that was kind of like a Pascal. That is, but I saw some kind of the influence from Lisp. I think it was a kind of the combination of the Pascal and Lisp.
So we're not quite to designing Ruby yet. And obviously this show is about painting the history of this 20-year rich history of the Ruby programming language. So of BASIC, of Lisp, of Pascal, what was it about those languages that got you excited? Like what specific features, what specific things, even if you couldn't write them, you can read them and think about them in your mind?
So from Pascal, I learned a lot from the programming language features can help programmers. Like, the old BASIC I used was a very limited. It didn't try to help programmers. Like the limitation in the number of the lines of code, limitation of the number of variables. They couldn't have any user-defined function. They didn't have anything but a few lines of basic code. So compared to that, the Pascal language tried to help programmers to be effective. So that kind of attitude influenced me a lot. So the programming language should help programmers. Then Lisp. So when I read about Lisp, I was very surprised by the consistency of the language. So the Lisp language was made up of the very few concepts like a list and some atoms. Then everything was combined out of those small number of concepts. So that kind of the consistency or extendability surprised me a lot.
And obviously, Smalltalk had a huge influence on Ruby.
Yeah, but back then it was early 80s, so the material about information about the Smalltalk language was very limited back then. So I studied about Smalltalk mostly in my university ages.
Is that when you gained access to actually start using some of these languages at university?
Yes.
So did you study computer science, or what did you go to school for specifically?
So in 1984, I went to the university called Tsukuba University in Japan. So I majored in computer science. So finally, I got access to the real computers, and I started programming. And also, the Tsukuba University has a huge library so that I can access to the books and the materials and the papers about the computer science. So, finally I got access to the information of computer science.
That must have been like heaven for you.
Yeah, it's in real really, it was a heaven.
What I find interesting is that there's roughly, based on some notes Jared pasted to me, is roughly 13 years difference between the day, or roughly the year from what Wikipedia tells us, is in the mid-90s. So assuming 1995, 1996, Ruby being created. So there's roughly, 13 years between your original age, or roughly 15 to 17, when you're kind of painting this picture that you just shared with us.
Mm-hmm.
So there's 13 years between that time.
Yeah.
You went to school and you learned a bunch of interesting things and all of that stuff. And so we're obviously here to talk deeply about this history of Ruby. So I want to tee that up real quick before we take our first break, because when we come back, we're going to dive into, some more details around those 13 years, and then specifically get into, the origination, the date, the time frame of Ruby, and what the original problem was, and those types of things. So we'll take our first break, and we'll be right back. Rollbar puts errors in their place, full stack error tracking for all applications in any language. And I talked to Brian Rude, the CEO and co-founder of Rollbar, deeply about what Rollbar is, what problem it solves, and why you should use it. Take a listen.
How do you build software faster? Like, how do you build better software faster? And there are tons and tons of aspects to that. Like, in Ruby is like, can you have a better language? Can you have better frameworks that help you be more expressive and more productive? So the flip side of that is, like, after you've built something that works, or at least mostly works, how do you go about getting it from working to in production and actually working? How do you cover the edge cases? How do you find things you missed? How do you iterate on it quickly? And that's kind of where what we're trying to do comes in. So we're trying to say, after you've shipped your software, you're not done. You still there's still work to do, and we want to help make that process of maintaining and polishing and keeping things running smoothly be really, really, really easy. So developers spend roughly half their time debugging, right? So anything we can do to make that process better is going to have a huge impact.
All right, that was Brian Rue, CEO and co-founder of Rollbar, sharing with you exactly why it fits, why it works for you. Head to rollbar.com/changelog. You get the bootstrap plan for free for 90 days. That's basically 300,000 errors tracked totally for free. Give Rollbar a try today. Again, head over to rollbar.com/changelog. All right, we're back from the break. And obviously, if you're listening to this show, 20 years of Ruby with Matz is like link bait, right? You're going to listen to that show. Even if you've never programmed Ruby before, you want to listen to the show because Matz is such an influential person in software development. Already, Jared and I have been enjoying Matt's story, how he got into programming and his journey through BASIC, Pascal, and Lisp. But ultimately, he got to a point where he was just maybe frustrated even further with usability and decided he can create his own language because you can do that. And so, Matz, Jared and I have been trying to dig and figure out when Ruby was created, and Wikipedia says mid-90s. Can you help us with a citation? Like, when was Ruby, in your eyes, when was Ruby officially born? So what can we call Ruby's birth date?
The birthday of the software is not well defined, just because, unlike a human being, so the software is not very born. But software, including programming languages, do not have any physical entities. So the logic or concept are very crucial for the existence of software. So in that sense, the name is pretty important for software.
Right.
So in programming, so if you name some concept in very good name or right name, so your design is guaranteed to be succeed. So I value names very much in programming. So in that sense, so I pick the date. I name Ruby,
Okay.
as a birthday of the Ruby programming language, which is February 24th, 1993.
So we're actually 23 years.
23 years of Ruby.
Yeah. So we got our title wrong. Hearing that, thank you for sharing the official date with us. So February, was it 23rd or 24th?
24th.
24th. February 24th, 1993. You named it Ruby. Has anybody ever asked you what the significance of the name Ruby? Like, where did Ruby come from, the name Ruby? Why is that, since names are so significant to you, why that name?
It is kind of like a coincidence. Like when I decided to create my own programming language, that I will tell that story later probably.
Yes.
But when I decided to name my programming language, I wanted to name it after name of the jewel, just because we had Pearl. Yeah, back then I talked with my friend about the concept and the plan. So the several names come up with the name of the programming language, my programming language. These were like diamonds and fire, but those names are so long and quite difficult to type. So after examining a few jewel names, we picked two candidates. The first one is Ruby. The second one is a Coral. But I talked with my friend, and the Ruby is shorter, and the Ruby jewel is more beautiful. So I picked the name Ruby.
So it's based on beauty.
Yeah.
And it's based on, in theory, easiness, because it's shorter. Not so much its length, but it's easy.
It's easy. And after that, we found out the Pearl is a birthstone of June, and the Ruby is a birthstone of July. So it was a good name for the programming language, which came after Pearl. But it was just coincidence.
Just coincidence.
So your next language will be the birthstone of August.
Aquamarine.
Now I'm Googling for birthstone of August. Not easy. Peridot.
Peridot.
Not as good as Ruby.
No.
So you had a name. It was 1993. You had some influences, including Lisp, Smalltalk, Perl, of course. You talk a lot about how every programming language is created by a person, and you also talk about how when you design a language, you design for specific things, and the big idea around Ruby, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's this idea of designing for the programmer, for programmer happiness, around this idea of joy, which was avant-garde for sure at the time, was quite almost revolutionary, you might say, with how popular Ruby eventually became. So where did that notion come from? Where did that influence where you said, let's optimize for programmer happiness? How'd you think of that?
Actually, I confess that I didn't think that at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
So some programming language are designed with specific purpose, like a BASIC and the Pascal as a programming education, or C for system programming, like the writing Unix operating system, or a small talk, like it was a prototype of the future programming environment or something like that. Mm-hmm. But unlike other programming language, I didn't have anything specific in my mind. I told you that I just wanted to create my own programming language.
Right.
But as a programmer, I wanted to use my programming language. So as a programmer, my daily job is writing some kind of a C language for main project, and like some Perl script or shell script as a side task. So the writing some kind of shells in a scripting language could help me use my programming language for my tasks, like a kind of dog fooding. So I picked scripting language for that purpose. I didn't think of solving my specific problem or anything like that. I just wanted to create my own programming language.
I love that. Like, it was a very pure desire. It's like, I just want to create a language.
Yeah. At the same time, I wanted to have fun with the designing and implementing or using my programming language. So at that time, I didn't focus on the effectiveness or productivity of programmers in general. I focused mainly on my joy in programming and designing of my own programming language. So that gradually leads into the programming joy of the programmer in general all over the world.
I was just going to say that it makes a lot of sense that you ended up creating a language around enjoyment and joy and programmer happiness, because you weren't designing for specific use cases like you mentioned with C or another language, or Perl, with like Perl's whole purpose was text extraction and reporting, right? Mm-hmm. And so it had that very practical goal, but your goal was to just enjoy making a language that you would love. And so what fell out of that was a language that is enjoyable to use. Just makes sense.
Mm-hmm. See, I would say the opposite. I would say that that's like kind of a happy accident.
Yes.
Because he said he wanted to dog food it, but it wasn't top of mind in the fact that like this is the main thing he wanted to do, but he wanted to be happy creating it, and so it seems like it's a happy accident to get there. Although it does make complete sense that that's what should come out of it.
Right. So you mentioned Lisp and how you liked how small Lisp was in its concepts, mm-hmm. and how consistent it was. You mentioned Smalltalk and Perl. And when you were originally designing Ruby, were you actively thinking about your use of these other languages or the things that you like and just, quote unquote, stealing those into Ruby? Was it, how do I say it? Were you actively taking features from Perl that you like and saying, I want those in Ruby? Or was it more of an indirect influence on the language?
So when I decided to create my own programming language, so I had been a big fan of object-oriented programming for years back then. So I wanted to apply the concept of object-oriented programming to my programming language. So, and back then I was a C programmer, so I wanted to feel comfortable as a C programmer when I using my own programming language. And I wrote many shell scripts and some Perl scripts. So I want my programming language can replace those languages and shells and Perl. So in combination of these, the idea of the object-oriented scripting language was gradually formed. So I took some kind of the Lisp interpreter and then put some class libraries out of Smalltalk and then picked the features out of Perl and chopped into the methods and then reorganized into the class libraries. In that way, I gradually designed my programming language named Ruby.
So you named it in 93. By 1995, you had a public release.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure out here if this was your 1.0. Yes, it was. Ruby 1.0. Oh, I'm sorry. Ruby 1.0 was 1996, if Wikipedia is correct.
96, yes.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that. You've fully formed this idea, right? You've given birth, so to speak, of a concept in working code for a 1.0 release. What happened next? Were people using it? Did you announce it somewhere? Did you keep it for yourself, or did you put it out into the world? And what did people think?
Yeah. Soon after I started the project in 93, virtually no one knew Ruby, just because it was my personal project, and only a few close friends knew about the language, and they helped me to try my baby programming language. But the implementing a programming language kind of took time. It took 6 months to do simple Hello World for me. I started in February. The simple Hello World worked on August. Writing Hello World programming in Ruby is, kind of one line of code, and it took us maybe 10 seconds or something. But implementing language to do Hello World is kind of huge task. I needed to implement string object, so I need a string class, and to implement string class, we need the object class to inherit, and the whole object system, and the whole messaging system, and then to call print, we need access to the standard I/O, and then I needed to objectify the standard I/O or something like that. But that took me 6 months to do simple Hello World.
Reminds me of that Carl Sagan quote about making an apple pie from scratch. You must first, create the universe?
Yes.
Sounds like you had to create the Ruby universe in order to have a Hello World from scratch.
Indeed.
So how long before other people started to use it?
Until December 94, virtually no one used Ruby, but 2 other friends. But 94, I passed some small message to the Usenet, which net news which we had to communicate to others on the internet back then. I don't know. I don't remember the exact number, but 10, 20 people were interested and formed a mailing list, and they advised me in the very early stage of Ruby. So these kind of the communication and discussion, so design and implementation of Ruby got better. Then I passed the whole Ruby source code into the internet December 21st, 1995.
So I guess once we're getting to more and more users, what do you feel like is roughly the time you feel like Ruby was really adopted by the programming world? When was it that, and what was it like at the time for people to really start using it? Not just, and I don't mean it in a negative way, 20 or 30 people, but a lot of people. When did that begin?
Yeah. Soon after I posted the source code of the Ruby, so I formed a mailing list.
Right.
And then 2 weeks later, we had 200 members of the mailing list. So that is kind of number.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. So after seeing, unknown programming language from nobody, so nobody knows me back then. So, but interested and joined the mailing list in 2 weeks. That is kind of surprising for me.
What do you think was it that? What was the secret recipe? What do you think was happening the right way to attract people? What was it about Ruby that was really getting them, and what languages were they coming from to try Ruby?
I'm sorry, but I don't know about the secret recipe. But I was so surprised. Only one thing I can think of is the Ruby is designed after my preference or taste. Surprisingly, so many other people felt similar way toward the programming and the programming languages. So that kind of preference invited them to involve in the Ruby community. So in the beginning, Ruby was designed for me, myself, only one person.
Right.
But surprisingly, so many people, not only in Japan, but all over the world, felt similar way and interested in Ruby. And they felt joy in programming Ruby. It was so out of my expectation, so far beyond my expectation.
It might be a good place to talk about the cultural divide. We have a note here, mainly just around how obviously Ruby was written by someone who's Japanese, speaks Japanese as their primary language. That's you, obviously. But Ruby has played this part in bringing people together from all over the world, the United States, Japan, and all over. And you've also got people who speak English primarily, learning Japanese to break down the cultural divides and be able to speak, your native language and whatnot. Can you speak to, what it's like to have such an influence, I guess, on those people, like how Ruby has bridged that gap between, cultural divide, language barriers, things like that?
Language barrier. Yeah. At least if I were born in English-speaking country, so my life would be much easier.
But
at least, so we programmers kind of have similar souls inside of us, despite the difference of the primary language we speak or the culture we brought up, or most of us feel similar way. So we are primarily programmers. So even though I was born in Japan, so you were born in States, or maybe others from other country, from other cultures, somehow we feel similar way. So Ruby language stimulate common soul of programmers.
Right. The common desire for usability, simplicity, joy, happiness.
Yeah, that kind of things.
Those, those are language universal. There's no language. It's to see me have joy is to see me smile, and to see you have joy is the same. You would be smiling. There'd be some sort of appearance on you that is language agnostic.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Well, what about things that that you like a lot about Ruby? What are your favorite parts of Ruby? You've written so much over these years. What is it about Ruby that really, I guess the easiest way to ask is just, what's your favorite part about Ruby? What is it that attracts people to Ruby?
Mm-hmm. As a language, so I like Ruby's extendability. Like we have Ruby language, but we can add many things like class libraries and the gems, so to extend the power of the language. So the Ruby language allows us to make Ruby even stronger by adding the classes, like adding objects. So that kind of extensibility I like the most. The second thing is a part of that is the block. The block is the block is a somehow form of the higher order function, but Ruby provides that things in very nifty way. So that forms you can extend the method with adding blocks. So I like that kind of things in Ruby. But in fact, the most important things in Ruby language is the community. Since we emphasize the happiness of programmers, so we cannot live without the programmers. We are not just a language. We are not just a technology. The community is most important for the language.
Well said, and I agree with you on the extendability to this day. And I know active support in Rails catches a lot of flack. But the fact that Ruby allows you to write out when you're thinking about a time and you think, well, it was 3 days ago, and you can type in your code 3.days.ago.
Yeah.
That's a joy for me. It so expresses exactly what I'm thinking, and I don't have to conform my sentence into a structure that the language requires of me. I can express it the way that it makes sense. And obviously active support's adding that to the number 3 in that case is absolutely a joy when it comes time to use it. So thank you for that. All these decisions, they have big consequences, and sometimes they make all of us smile. Sometimes they make some of us smile and others of us frown. But they're all trade-offs, and no doubt, Matz, you've had some decisions in the language design and maybe even in the implementation that you look back and think, if I could take that back, I would. So we're not going to ask you now. We're going to ask you on the other side of the break. You talked about your favorite parts of Ruby, which is extendability, as well as the community, which is so important. But we're going to ask you about any design decisions that, if you had a second chance, if you're designing that new language next year, you wouldn't put it in. So stay tuned, and we'll talk about that on the other side of the break.
Full Stack Fest is sponsoring this show. It's a week-long full stack development conference, September 5th through 9th in Barcelona. If you haven't seen this conference, check it out. You're going to love it. Fullstackfest.com. They have a total of 16 speaker slots open, and yes, call for papers are open right now. They're open till May 14th, so don't wait. Talks are 40 minutes long each, including Q&A, DevOps, infrastructure, UX, browser technology, mobile, backend, distributed systems, machine learning, AI, IoT, wearable technology, robotics, you name it. You can talk about it at Full Stack Fest. It's a full stack conference, end-to-end, September 5th through 9th, 2016 in Barcelona. Head to fullstackfest.com. Once again, September 5th through 9th, 2016 in Barcelona, fullstackfest.com. And tell them Adam from the Changelog sent you.
All right, we're back with Matz. And Matz, we could probably camp out all day on design decisions.
Yes.
We don't have all day, and we have 20 years to cover, so we will be moving along. But you mentioned some of your favorite things about Ruby, extendability, the community,
The block.
Is there anything that you regret the block, absolutely. In terms of design decisions, whether they were initial or even over the years, that you say, probably not my finest moment. Can you share that with us?
The biggest regret was I took too many from Perl.
Oh, like some of the global variables, like the $sign
magic
colon and
variable
stuff like that.
things or something like that. So,
Mhm.
so at the very early stage of design of Ruby, I wanted to create a scripting language that could replace Perl. So I took many things from Perl. So my primary goal was that everything Perl could do should be done by Ruby as well.
Mm.
So I took many things out of Perl, but I should have thought that Matt thought more about the features I took, just because at that time my scope is to narrow down to scripting language. Ruby itself is not really a script language anymore, so it's a general purpose programming language, right? Right
Mhm.
now, like so in that way, some features are too specific to scripting, those special global variable is very handy for the small programs,
Mhm.
the 10 lines of code or something like that. But once you write bigger code, that kind of the magic features makes implementation more complex or behavior more complex to understand. So I regret the many of them. So those features are gradually become obsolete these days. No one uses the magic firewall any longer, but we implementators still support those things. That makes our implementation even more complex or error prone. So I regret those kind of features.
They're good for golfing, but not much else. Golfing
Yeah,
and scripting.
golfing.
Mhm.
Indeed.
So you mentioned that Ruby started off as a scripting language in your mind, and as it became generally used and generally useful,
Mhm.
it's now a general purpose programming language. One thing that also happened in the early 2000s was the advent of Rails,
Yeah.
which um, which exploded in popularity, as you well know, and alongside it, Ruby exploded in popularity,
Mhm.
moving beyond the bounds of the community that you had built over, maybe the first 9 or 10 years of Ruby's existence, now to a much larger community. So much so that many people look at Ruby as a web programming language, and not a general purpose programming language. Your thoughts on that perception of Ruby being web focused as a language?
I have kind of mixed feeling. So I'm happy with the name title of the web programming language. The Ruby is very good at web programming thanks to Rails. And then, the writing web web application using Rails means the programmers have to write their programs in Ruby. So that's okay for me. In contrast, some programmers hesitate to think about the use Ruby out of web. Ruby can write anything, like the infrastructure managing, like a chef or puppet, or maybe some other features like desktop application. You can write desktop application in Ruby. You can write shell scripting in Ruby. You can write the infrastructure managing in Ruby, or you can write even the mobile app, or even you can program embedding system in Ruby. So even though I'm happy with the title of web programming language, but
Mhm.
I also wanted to know them. So Ruby can be usable beyond web.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think many people who learned Ruby because of Rails or came to Ruby because of Rails, any of those came for Rails, but stuck around for Ruby. And it won them over even more so than the web framework. And they then take it into all the different areas of their programming needs. And like you said, you find it um, in many places,
Yeah.
not just the web.
A good example of that, though, Jared, is your own personal take on it. Before the show started, I'm not sure if it made it into the audio for the listeners or not, but you had said that Ruby to you is the thing by which you judge all languages. So I'm not sure how Matz feels about that. We'll ask him, of course, but just that Ruby, I'm not sure how you got to Ruby, but maybe that's an interesting story as a side note. But I can imagine it's probably similar. You came for the Rails, but you got the Ruby and you loved it. And then now it's it's your barometer. It's the thing you judge all things on to see if it's the language that fits for you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, absolutely it is. And as I look around, the field and all these interesting new languages are popping up. Matz, as a language person, I'm sure you're keen on many of these. And so I look at each one and I say, can I write 3.days.ago in this? And I use that as a test, or can I extend it to even get that kind of a feature,
Right.
or that kind of a statement? But Matz, how does it feel? Because you were influenced by so many different languages. We mentioned a handful of them: Perl, Python, Smalltalk, Lisp.
Yeah.
Now you're being an influence. Your language that you designed has influenced Clojure. It's influenced Crystal very, very much. Elixir, Groovy, Rust, Swift. What does that feel like to have, created this language that you pulled in ideas from all these other places, and now your language is being used as a barometer for quality or as an influence for new languages to be created?
Yeah. So I have considered myself as some kind of a language geek, or like a wannabe in the programming language. As time goes by, surprisingly, my masterpiece Ruby becomes so popular, mostly thanks to the Rails, and it started influence other programming language or other programming language designers. So that is so honor for me. I feel like I now become a member of the broader community of language designer.
You're
So-
now elite,
Yeah,
part of the elite.
yeah, well, not really elite, but me a member of the programming language designer community.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm pretty happy about that.
Maybe this is an extension to that. So not so much just your happiness with your influence, but while we're here on this topic, maybe a bit of advice. Let's say there's a language designer or a budding language designer or a future language designer listening to the show right now, or years from now, and they've got you, someone who's been down a long road, 23 years with Ruby so far, studied many languages, now part of the elite club. What advice would you give back, and could you give back to influence future language designers in a positive way? What advice? You may have said some of the things so far, like positivity, happiness, and things like that, but what's one core thing you think you could share with a language designer out there?
Few years ago, the Dave Thomas, our Dave Thomas, we have a lot of Dave Thomases out there. So our Dave Thomas, one of the programmer, told in the conference keynote that is the programming is a process of designing a domain-specific language for the application. So in that sense, every programming is a design of the DSL or API for that particular application. So every programmer is or should be language designers. So take my advice as a old language designer: mind design and mind psychology. We programmers often focus on technologies. We are human. We are people. So we have minds and feelings. Those feelings influence our productivity or effectiveness. So when you design anything like an API or language or anything, think about how you or how users feel about those design. That kind of things is the key of good design of API and the language and the programming in general. So that is the reason I said mind design and mind psychology.
I was going to say, we're kind of curious, maybe your thoughts on a few particular languages. You mentioned, I think it was before we started the show, that you had listened to our show on Elixir. And you also mentioned that you're interested in listening to our show on Haskell. Some of our listeners are interested in your thoughts on Elixir as a language and on Go. as a language, and any other languages that you find interesting that are up and coming. Could you share your thoughts on those with us?
So when I designed Ruby in early 90s, the computers had only one CPU. So we didn't have to care about the parallelism. We did have concurrency, but we didn't care about the parallelisms. So we didn't have multi-core. But these days, everything is multi-core, everything in parallel. So we have tons of computers in cloud. So we have many cores in our laptops. So we now we have to care about the concurrency and the parallelism. If I knew about this future, I care more about the concurrency in the design of my language. So in that sense, I'm very interested in the design of Elixir. The Elixir is based on Erlang, which is the very concurrent programming language. The care of the the multi-core and a better concurrent model. So we are trying to address that kind of concurrency in Ruby 3, but Erlang has long history of concurrency, and they have done very good things in providing parallel programming. We look up that kind of history, and we have to learn a lot from design of Erlang and the design of Elixir.
For the future of Ruby, I guess when you look at what you like about Elixir, what you like about Erlang, and what you like about Go and their focus, now that there is a future, obviously, and there is this now an awareness of 128 cores and concurrency and things like that. Back in 90s when you were designing Ruby, you didn't have that concern, and now there is. What can you say about the path to give Ruby concurrency? What can you say about the future that Ruby has when it comes to concurrency?
Mm-hmm. So we have several ideas for future Ruby concurrency. So the first one is some kind of the streaming process, like adding some kind of the pipelines to the language, and then those pipelines process that data parallelly. Those pipelines process data in parallel. And then the other idea is providing some kind of the more isolated things than threads. The most bad things about threads is the data sharing. So the thread can look into the other thread access, like those kind of the shared state is the source of all evil. So we could provide that some kind of the isolated capsule of the parallel execution. So those capsules can be communicated via like some kind of a channel, like the coroutine has. In that way, so we can avoid the data sharing. So we can provide the share nothing model, like a language like Elixir provides. We are experimenting on those ideas right now. So maybe a year or two, so we will decide which idea to pick, and the idea will gradually come into the Ruby 3.
So Ruby 3, what's I guess anybody listening to that's got to be excited who is a huge fan of Ruby, having a path of concurrency and having, in quotes, what we've had talked about on the show before that you mentioned, Jose Valim, having proper support for concurrency was something he had said about his departure from Ruby and his desire to create Elixir. There is a path. How far out? I know that it's difficult to project things like that, but is this a year or two? Is it half a year? What's roughly the time frame people can get excited about for the future of Ruby?
So we are open source, so we don't provide any specific roadmap. But in my mind, I hope it will be released before 2020.
Okay. Well, We're getting near the end. We've got roughly 15 minutes left in our scheduled show timing. So let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we have a Slack room for those who support the show, changelog members, or changeloggers as we call them. If you're a fan of the show and you want to support us as well, you can go to changelog.com/membership to learn more about that. But you get access to this private Slack channel, and in there we dropped a message that, hey, we're having Matz on the show today. This is really awesome. Anybody have any questions? And a lot of questions came up around mRuby. So we'll go into this break. When we come back, we'll talk a bit about mRuby and what we can expect from it, and kind of some things you can see for the future of it, and maybe even how you get the government of Japan to sponsor it. So that's kind of interesting. So we'll take this break. We'll talk about that on the other side, and also close. We'll be right back. Every Saturday morning, we ship an email called Changelog Weekly. It's our editorialized take on what happened this week in open source and software development. It's not generated by a machine. There's no algorithms involved. It's me, it's Jared, and the rest of the Changelog team hand curating this email, keeping up to date with the latest headlines, links, videos, projects, and repos. And to get this awesome email in your inbox every single week, head to changelog.com/weekly and subscribe. All right, we're back from our break with Matz. This is the tail end of the show, Matz, but we've got so much more to cover, so much rich history of this awesome language called Ruby that you created 23 years ago. And Jared and I, we've been hosting this show, the Changelog, for a while, and we've had the likes of Go on here. We've had the likes of Jose Valim come on here and talk about Elixir, and a lot of interesting things happening in other languages. And during the break, as listeners know, we talk to our guests, and sometimes we share things in those breaks that really need to be on air. And something I asked Matz off air, but now will be on air, is maybe any envy that he might have, or those who are involved in steering Ruby in the right way, any envy they might have around concurrency and dealing with, just compatibility and things like that. And so, Matz, take it away. I mean, that was a good answer you said in the off air, but say as much as you like here on air about that.
I am pretty happy about working with Ruby. It is good language. Sure, I say that. It's quite challenging. We have to solve many technical challenges, and that is quite amusing for us as programmers. So we are pretty happy about working with Ruby, but sometimes we feel frustrated to keep compatibility. So we have millions of Ruby programs out there. So if we make any incompatible change, so that would break so many Ruby programs. So due to, I don't like that word though, so social responsibility. So we are very conservative to make incompatible change. For recent years, the keeping compatibility is our primary goal of the design and enhancement of the Ruby programs. So that compatibility things sometimes hinder us to make progress. So in that way, I sometimes envy the other programming language, namely minor programming language, so that they can make big change very easier.
You have a lot of, as you said, millions of Ruby applications out there, and so as you said, you have this social responsibility, and so that's holding you back from progress.
Sometimes, yes.
Yeah, which is expected, right? I mean, it's known fact, right? Once you have baggage, so to speak, and not in a negative way, once you have baggage, you must carry that baggage.
Yeah,
and that can sometimes stop you from chasing those new shiny objects. But you'd mentioned also that mRuby is one way you get to sort of tease that part of you that gets to chase the shiny objects, gets to do something interesting. So I'd mentioned that we have a Slack room with members in it that chime in when we ask them to about, we have a guest coming on and they had some questions around the future of mruby and things like that. What's interesting and I guess with mruby as it relates back to this tickling of the envy thing for you with other languages?
So yeah, working on the other things than Ruby, like mruby is the subset of the Ruby language that targeted to some kind of the embedding system, like embedding in applications or embedding in systems and devices. Like that, working on that kind of things is quite refreshing. In addition, I have been working on the other toy programming language named Streem, which is, the Streem language is very early stage, so no one uses. So it's quite easy to the drastic change. So these kinds of experiences are very refreshing for me.
Let's focus on mruby first, and we do want to have a few questions on Streem. But on mruby specifically, looks like you started it in 2012. As you said, it's for embedding, whether inside other programs or on devices.
Mm-hmm.
What's the status of it? Is it production ready? Are people putting it on devices? And then does it have a future roadmap, or does it just kind of follow Ruby's advancements and keep parity?
The status of mruby is quite close to production ready. So some companies already use mruby in their products. For example, a company in Brazil created some kind of the payment devices embedded mruby. So that devices understands the credit card, debit card, and Bitcoin. Then those kind of the systems can be configured using Ruby. So with embedded mruby. The other companies in Japan ships internet router embedded to mruby. They use mruby to provide the routing configuration in Ruby, or maybe or in the character user interface using mruby. Some other companies experimenting mruby to be embedded in their systems. The examples are, for example, the microsatellites, like satellites with 5 inches squared, piggyback with the rockets, then go around over the Earth for a year or two. Then those systems is configured by mruby.
So when you say rockets, you mean like a rocket ship?
Yeah, rocket.
Nice. Okay.
Now you have Adam's attention.
Yeah, you say rocket ship, my ears go up.
One thing about this in your README for mruby, it says this is sponsored by the Regional Innovation Creation R&D programs of the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry of Japan.
Yeah.
Anything to share with us on that? How that got set up and just, I don't know, the details of that relationship and why they're supporting it so much?
Yeah. I have been working on the local government of the prefectures in Japan. So Fukuoka Prefecture is one of them. So during the work with the Fukuoka government, they applied the government-funded project. So they got granted. The grant was originally designed for some kind of the hardware stuff. So it was quite difficult to explain them. So they asked us this, where did you install those facilities or something like that? Yeah, it is software, no facility.
There's no real thing here, okay?
no physical things or that kind of things. But somehow we got granted. So with that granted, we organized some kind of the joint venture. So in those processes, so we implemented mruby. The most important things is a deadline. We open source. We usually have no deadline. We do when we do. When we do when we can, or something like that. So it might took years to implement. So
right.
I had the vague idea of implementing the smaller implementation of Ruby language, but implementing a language processor from scratch is kind of huge task. So it is quite difficult to start. The first step is the most biggest step. So that grant forced me to make a big first step. They helped us to they forced us and helped us to make a first step. Then after 2 years, in 2012, so we finally made it open source.
So I guess going back to maybe something Jared asked, I'm not sure if we got full clarity. At least it's a little unclear to me, but his question was around the advancement of mRuby and if it's closely tied to be, because it's Ruby 1.9 compatible.
Mm-hmm.
Is mRuby your outlet for progress, as we talked about when it came to the Envy, or is it something different? Is it tied to Ruby's progress?
Yeah.
And held back by maybe even? Does it have that same handicap?
So mRuby itself is the base the ISO Ruby standard, so that we cannot make arbitrary change to the language. That in that sense, I sometimes feel similar frustration. But the mRuby implementation is subset, so we can drop off. So
it is held back now, but if you wanted to, you could break away. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The implementation is a subset of Ruby, so you can avoid a lot of the traps or the things that you don't necessarily think are required to support.
Right.
But in terms of the language semantics, it conforms to the ISO standard. And so in that way, it is tied to the language.
Correct.
Which makes sense because it is Ruby for, embedded. So you want it to be the same languages as much as possible. We're running out of time. Let's talk about Streem a little bit. You mentioned influences from Ruby, which makes sense. Erlang, other functional programming languages. It looks like very much the Unix philosophy. Can you tell us, you gave us a brief overview, but give us a little bit more. When you started it, you say it's still just a toy or something that you're playing with. Do you see this becoming your next big thing, or is it just that outlet to play around?
Yeah, just outlet to play around. So I as a side job, as I write articles for the Japanese programming magazine. So about the programming and the programming language. So as an example of that article, so I designed the small toy programming languages based on the idea of the streaming programming. So I named it Streem, Streem. So then I put it as a backup. I put it my repository into GitHub. So last year, and then the end of the December 2014, so almost a year ago. So then someone found my repository. Back then,
happen, I bet, with you.
Yeah. Someone put that things into the the Hacker News, and it was buzzed so much. It was amazing. Back then, I had only 200 lines of the the syntax description, so virtually nothing. So, but it was buzzed. We had a lot of the issues in the GitHub. It was not supposed to be open. It's supposed to be public, but it is just a backup. But then someone found my repository.
You're a victim of your own success in that way.
Yeah, funnily, so I got the pull request from the other programmer. So that okay, you described your language in the article, so I implemented your language.
Wow.
I only described my language in the article, and I only put the 200 lines of the syntax description. and the other one implemented my programming language. Yeah. Since then, I modified a lot, but it is still based on the interpreter, the ASD interpreter, which is written by the other one, the other guy.
Right. I guess as Jared had said, we are kind of running out of time. As much as we would love to keep you here, Matz, and keep talking to you about this rich history, because it's fun for us. Hopefully it's fun for you as well to
yeah, it was fun.
Take the time to go back and think about, man, where did this come from? How did I get here? Why am I here? And it's interesting to take that same thing and share that with the listening audience. And as a listener of the show, Matz, which I'm still blown away by, Jared, I can't believe that Matz listens to the show, which is cool. I love that. But Matz, we often ask those who come on the show who their heroes are, and there's several times that you're somebody else's hero. And so generally the question is, who's your programming hero? But in this case, who's somebody who's influenced you to be the Matz you are today, to be the Matz that has led Mini Swana through Ruby and has this Matz is nice and so we are nice kind of community that's come and followed him. Who has influenced you? Who's your hero that made you who you are today?
My primary programming hero is Larry Wall, who is designed Perl. Not really as a language designer, but as a leader of the community. So he has sense of humor in his keynotes, and then he has sense in the design of program software. His works like Apache, Erlang, and Perl, all of them are very helpful to programmers. So that kind of attitude and that kind of sense of humor is my role model. So my primary programming hero is Larry Wall, definitely.
You have any secondaries?
The Alan Kay, who designed the future of programming by providing the object-oriented programming. And then John McCarthy, who provides the idea of Lisp and the idea of the very nifty programming language.
Very good heroes there. Well, Matz, this is a chance for you to share whatever you think you might want to share. Is there anything else that Jared and I may have left out? Any important detail in this 23-year history of Ruby that we might have missed? Anything you want to share that you've got on your mind at all before we close out?
Yeah, we are still working on Ruby 3. We have tons of ideas, but we are still open to new ideas. Like, we worked on Ruby for last 23 years, so we sometimes become narrow-minded. So we need fresh ideas out of the community. So submit any ideas to our issue tracker, bugs.rubylang.org. We may not be able to accept all of them, but at least the reading new ideas are very refreshing for us.
We'll link your Ruby issue tracking system up in our show notes. And that's an interesting thing you said there too, because one other question we tend to end with, which I'll just ask because why not? It's something you kind of teed up in a way, but feel free to extend it if you like. We ask, how can the community support Ruby? So I guess one way to share ideas through your bug tracker. What other ways, what other things out there are in Ruby that you can point people to? How can people step in and help Ruby see progress?
So people considers Ruby as my programming language. So it's designed by me. So it's designed by a person. But in reality, the Ruby has long been a language designed by the community. Of course, I lead them and I make final decisions. But still, so many ideas and so many implementations are from community. So the Ruby is our programming language. The idea and the use case and then the pull request from the community so to form the language. So if I haven't had a community, I couldn't make up Ruby. So Ruby wouldn't be Ruby without community.
Well, there you hear it. So if you're out there and you're writing Ruby code and you have some influence, or you would like to share some influence back to Ruby, there's Matt's invitation to say that Ruby wouldn't be Ruby without you. So if you're listening to this and you're excited about these 23 years of history of this language and the future of this language, then you could be a future Matz and either step in and help mRuby, step in and help Ruby, or however, step in and share what you have back to Ruby and back to the community. Matz, I want to thank you so much for, I know English isn't your first language, and I know that it's tiring to speak English as not your primary language, but I really appreciate you stepping out like this and sharing your story in your non-native language, because there's so many people out there who really care about you and care about your language and care about the future of programming and really appreciate the influence you've had on it. And so to come on this show today and sit here with Jared and I and share what you have, it's just an honor to talk to you like this and to get a chance to help you share this beautiful story of Ruby and this awesome history you have yourself. With that, we're going to close out the show. So listeners, thank you so much for listening to the show. If this is your first time listening to the show, sad face, go to changelog.com/podcast and subscribe in iTunes or your podcast app. We also have 2 emails we ship out. One's called Changelog Weekly, so go to changelog.com/weekly. The other one is called Changelog Nightly, and obviously that one's nightly, so go to changelog.com/nightly. Those are 2 awesome emails we ship out that keep everyone up to date on what's fresh, new, and open source. One's editorialized, one is nightly, and sort of the catch-all of everything that's interesting that's happening on GitHub. So if you want to catch up and stay up, then go ahead and subscribe to those. But that is it for this show today. So fellas, let's say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thanks, Matz.
Bye-bye. Thank you for having me.